等许许多多的梵蒂冈图书馆等等许许多多的地方都有这些双语资料或者多语资料在等着我们去发现它们，去研究它们。今天呢只是其中的一个案例我们下面呢就请我们的主持人来介绍今天的主讲，然后大家有问题的话可以在这个 chat 里面留言Professor Mark Mastrangelo, it's your turn now. I'll give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jinyu. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and to launch this project today. Welcome to the Guangqi International Center for Scholars Talk. Our speakers today will be talking about Gonçalves' Lexicon Magnum Latino-Sinicum and its digitization. I just want to give short introductions to each speaker and let them take it away. Lara Frymark is a digitization and data specialist.
Recording in progress.
And she is a 2012 Dickinson graduate of Dickinson College, our former student who's gone on to great things. She took her BA in classics here in 2012 and then went on to get an MA in computer science at Brandeis University. When we created the Latin and Greek core vocabularies for the Dickinson College Commentaries, Lara began her long and productive association with the DCC as a student intern and helped us greatly with that. So welcome, Lara. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the lexicon. And our next speaker is Professor Chris Francese, my colleague for 26 years at Dickinson College. He is the author.
Mark, you're muted now.
Thank you, Chris. Chris Francese, who's an author of 3 books, Parthenius of Nicaea and Roman Poetry, Ancient Rome in So Many Words, and Ancient Rome, an Anthology of Sources with Scott Smith. For today's talk, it's very important, his function as project director of the Dickinson College Classical Commentaries over the past 12 years has really made digitization and digital humanities and digital classics something of an international phenomenon, helped to make it an international phenomenon. And of course, he is the co-director of Dickinson Classics Online, which provides sources and resources for Chinese readers of Latin and Greek. So with no further ado, here I introduce and give you Chris Francese and Lara Frymark.
Thank you so much, Professor Liu and my old friend Mark, and it's absolutely a privilege to be here. I'm so glad to see everyone, some old friends and new friends, and thank you so much for coming. Our purpose today is to introduce this long-running project. I have 3 sections for the talk. The first will discuss Gonçalves and his dictionary, how it came to be and what it looks like. I'll show you some examples. The second part will have to do with why and how we decided to make it searchable through digitization and some of the challenges that we encountered along the way. And Lara will speak to some of the very clever solutions that she came up with. And then finally, I have 3 questions for you all, and I hope that these will begin open discussion. So I'm hoping that we have ample time for a more open discussion of this project and perhaps future projects along these same lines. Here is the title page of the edition that we used. It's styled a 3rd edition and was published in what was then Peking in 1936. But this was evidently a reprint of an 1892 revision of the original 1841 work. So 1841, the original publication. There's a significant 1892 revision, and this is a reprint of that. The first thing to say about this is that the title does not lie. Titulus non mentitur. Valde magnum est. 757 pages, 36,496 discrete lemmas. It has all the words. Here is our finished digitized version, and the user interface, what it looks like. I'm going to share the link to this in the chat so you can get a look at it while we talk. Let me see. Attempting to share this link. 1 second. I'm having some trouble doing that. Maybe Lara, would you see if you can share that link in the chat? Well, this dictionary is so big that it even has the rare word andabata, which is a type of gladiator who, for the entertainment of the audience, fights with no opening in his helmet, that is, in effect, blindfolded and unable to see. In many ways, I feel that as a non-Chinese speaker working on this project, I too was fighting blindfolded. Andabata sum, semicaecus, pugnans in tenebris. Luckily, we had the assistance of many native Chinese speakers, foremost among them Xia Qizhen from Brown University, Yan Xiun, who was a Dickinson College student in 2016, and Juan Coderch, who's present on this call, I'm grateful to say. Peter Xu, we had many volunteers and helpers to make this project work. We'll talk more about the editing process shortly. Any luck on sharing that link, Lara?
I believe so. Okay. It should be in the chat as far as I can tell.
Great. Good. So the dictionary is a product of this place, the College of St. Joseph in Macau. This institution operated as a school and seminary for over 130 years, administered first by the Jesuits and later by the Order of Lazarists, also known as the priests of the Congregation of the Mission. The Lazarists, the order to whom Gonçalves belonged, took it as their special calling to minister to the rural poor and the elderly. And they cultivated a humility and lack of pretension while pursuing academic standards that were similar to those of the Jesuits. By the way, I've also shared these slides, and I'll send you a link to that in a moment. Gonçalves himself was born in 1799, and he spent his entire career at St. Joseph's after arriving in Macau in 1813. He died and was buried there in 1841. We should envision two main types of students at this institution. There are Chinese students who were studying humanities and religion to pursue a career in the Portuguese civil service stationed in Asia, or meant to continue their religious education and be trained for the priesthood or the missionary field. That's group one. And group two would be European students who needed to learn spoken Chinese in order to be better missionaries. So there's a kind of dual audience in certain ways for his linguistic efforts. Gonçalves himself was an industrious scholar with a passion for Chinese grammar in particular, particularly the spoken language. He worked with Chinese native speakers and drew on the work also of European sinologists who were actively studying and describing the Chinese language and culture for European audiences, especially Robert Morrison, who was the first Protestant missionary to China. You can see in the titles of his works this twofold purpose, right? To teach Europeans spoken Chinese and to teach Chinese young people Portuguese and Latin. He also included Cantonese variants in many of his earlier works. What little scholarship has been done on Gonçalves focuses on his interesting conception of Chinese grammar and his approach to teaching. He was actively trying to grapple with and understand and describe the grammar and figure out effective ways to teach it. These are two articles that I found especially helpful. Let me see if I can actually share my slides at this point. So if you want to follow up any of these references, you can. There we go. I can share. All right. So this article by Levy deals with his language pedagogy and his conception of the Chinese language, and this Uchida article also deals with sort of the Lazarists and how they approached these issues. According to Levy, Gonçalves' methods anticipated the insights of modern second language acquisition theorists. He emphasized active production in the target language, not mere translation. He was very alive to the cultural embeddedness of language and the necessity of an idiomatic understanding of words and phrases, not just a mechanical process of one-to-one translation. So I think he was ahead of his time in this regard. Accordingly, the Lexicon Magnum is rich in idioms. It includes things that would be useful in humble rural situations, as he imagined his missionaries might find themselves in. And he digs deep into Latin literature of all kinds to find some many interesting phrases. So yeah, defectus pilis means bald, like lacking in hair. Defectus dentibus, toothless, lacking in teeth. Defendere vestes atineis, to keep the moths off of your clothing. So these are just completely random examples, by the way, that I didn't take any time to hunt up. Just every page has this kind of level of deep idiomatic detail in it. I think this is typical or sort of representative of his attitudes. Yet the dictionary also had scientific ambitions, and this is important. It was very rich, it is very rich in names of fish and plants, for example. And this aspect was further enhanced by the 1892 revisers, who I believe remain anonymous. I haven't been able to find their names. But they clearly valued this scientific element and natural history part and went to some efforts to modernize and improve those aspects. The missionary context is sometimes quite clear, as when I just found this a charming example, somewhat charming example. He provides an idiomatic Latin way of saying, "You seem to me to be totally at sea regarding the nature of the divine. Mihi natare videris in natura deorum." And so he has the verb to swim, of course, but then all these idioms that he provides are quite revealing in certain ways. So why digitize this work? And I think there are, in my mind, there really were three reasons to embark on this. And the first is that we can see the benefits of existing digitized reference works in projects like Perseus and Logeon. As I'm sure you know, what got Perseus started back in the 80s was a massive program of digitization of both dictionaries and texts and commentaries and encyclopedias, and this is really the backbone and the essence of Perseus, and that dictionaries in particular have been leveraged in a very helpful way at the University of Chicago in the Logeon project, which I'm sure you use. The second reason was really the success of a project that Lara and I did before this, which is digitizing an Aeneid dictionary by a scholar named Henry Simmons Fries. And I'll show you a little bit about that in a second. And then the third was that our first visit to China, frankly, in 2015, thanks to Professor Liu, brought home to me and to Mark the relative lack of resources for Chinese-speaking Latinists who were going predominantly through English and didn't have the sort of digitized and resources that English speakers enjoy. So the Fries, just to show you briefly this project that Lara and I had done, it's a dictionary of words in the Aeneid, and the distinctive feature of it is that it has citations of particular passages where particular meanings occur, and so we were able to marry this data, this dictionary, with some frequency data about words in the Aeneid that helped us include the number of occurrences for each word, so we know which are the most common words in the Aeneid, how common they are. And so that's a combination of resources here that seem to yield a useful result. Useful especially for Dickinson College Commentaries, in that combining the Fries dictionary with a parsed Aeneid, a fully parsed Aeneid that is analyzed to know exactly which head word each word form comes from. This allowed us to create complete and accurate running vocabulary lists for the entire Aeneid with context-specific definitions just for the Aeneid. And this is already up on the site. This is a link here, which I can also Well, you can just go to dcc.dickinson.edu and find that quite easily. But this is a major infrastructure boon that we never would have been able to do without Lara's work on the Friese dictionary and then combining this with other resources. All right, so that went so well. I was like, okay, what's the next? What's the next step? The Friese Denison. Oh, sorry, I forgot one point. The shareability of the digitized dictionary meant that it could be included on Logeon, and Helma Dieck at the University of Chicago prominently features this work. She thought it was so useful that she puts it right at the head of the Logeon entries for words that it contains. All right, so that was the sort of thinking on my part of why we should do this. And the question then became how? How do we make this? How do we digitize it? Now, the key thing is we could not simply outsource it like the way Perseus did, where they just sent it to a digitization firm and said, please digitize this, hand key this. There was no software available in 2016 that would reliably recognize both Roman and traditional Chinese characters, so we couldn't just acquire a piece of software and do it that way. No digitization firm could handle both, that we could find, could handle both character sets. So we had to do it ourselves. The plan was roughly as follows. Crucial to my initial thinking was the concept of linked open data. This is the idea that to reach its potential, data must not be sitting alone in its own box, but has to be linked to other relevant data sets. As we had done with Friese, right? So we had Friese, it's on Logeon, it's linked with these other data sets, and that's how you really leverage the power of it. So this is why I insisted early on that we try to equate Gonçalves's headwords, his lemmas, with the lemmas used by Logeon and Perseus. Right, so take the example of the word eo in Latin, either the verb I go or the adverb, for that reason, eo, right? So adverb or verb, and there are numbers which distinguish those two homonyms in the Logeon/Perseus lemma set, and I wanted us to try and coordinate with that lemma set so that our resource could talk to Perseus and Logeon and be exploited by other projects and compared with other dictionaries, right? So this would allow it to be part of a universe of Latin dictionaries, not just by itself. All right, so the basic outline would be to scan the physical book, which we did at Dickinson. We were able to get a copy from Princeton, and that yielded a PDF. We then used something called Abby Fine Reader, piece of software that yielded a digitized result that had to be corrected extensively by hand. Then the plan was to put that into a spreadsheet, combine it with these Logeon lemmas, and then share it with whoever wanted it. Okay, so that was the plan. And I want to hand it over to Lara so she can talk about some of the challenges that we encountered.
Hello, I'm Lara. So Professor Francese has talked to you a bit about kind of the purpose, the idea, the vision of what we've been trying to do with this whole project. My role here has been much narrower and much more technical in scope, and possibly much less interesting. We'll see. But I was primarily focused simply on whipping the data from the initial digitization into a usable system. That is how to do it. So I'm going to be speaking about three broad challenges that needed to be dealt with when I came on board and how we dealt with them. Roughly, these can be categorized as data set challenges, data item challenges, and data accuracy challenges. Now, despite the probably unnecessary technical terminology I've used here, these are very straightforward and should be quite simple to understand, I hope. And to be honest, I can even boil them down further to just saying that my work was about consistency, and keeping everything consistent. All right, so first, next slide, please. Data set challenges. What do I mean by that? Well, as Professor Francese noted, we had to digitize this text ourselves. And in the early stages, we had a lot of contributors, both doing the digitization itself and doing the immediate cleanup work of the results. And to be clear, I don't wish in any way to slight or undermine the incredible work that they did, but there was a lot of inconsistency that crept in, which was inevitable. We had different people doing different things with different understandings at different times, often with different methods. Variation was going to creep in, and variation is absolutely a nemesis of any database project. So a couple of specific examples, V words and Et words, so named because that's all they really showed. You can see them pointed out on the slide with the orange and blue arrows respectively. They're just placeholders, pointers, cross-references. Et or and meaning that it uses the definition of the following lemma, and V standing for vide or C, meaning to refer to the listed lemma. Now, there was some question of how to address these, and in the spreadsheet we created after the initial digitization, the Et words were handled very inconsistently. Sometimes they would be collapsed or combined into just one entry. Other times they'd appear with duplicated definitions. Other times they'd have been removed entirely. And these are all legitimate choices for how to deal with them, but the inconsistency caused confusion. And worse, there was no way of knowing what was done or why. Was there a specific reason one Et word was removed and another collapsed? There's no accounting for it. And no way of easily changing our mind afterwards if we decided, oh no, we should have done things differently. And the V words presented similar problems with removal, duplication, what have you. And those are also just the easy ones to point out. There were less clear-cut situations throughout where someone probably had a reason for doing something, but we just couldn't tell. Ultimately, we needed a plan for how we were going to treat this data set as a whole. And the answer, and this will be a running theme, is to start from the source. We can make changes in presentation or decisions about how to or if to include certain oddities like the V and Et words, but we need to have that data. We need to be able to show our work, as it were, to have a trail back to the initial document that allows us to see that we made a decision deliberately and with intention, and what that decision was. So I started by creating a coding system. Every word was coded by its absolute position in the dictionary. You can see it right here. C081-04, Caimentum. It includes the first letter, the 3-digit page number, a dash, its position on the page. That is to say, Caimentum would be the fourth word on page 81. And then there's an underscore and the first word in the lemma itself. And as simple and straightforward as this is, there is tremendous power in it. Henceforth, we could look at any entry in our spreadsheet, in our database, and know unmistakably what it was referring to in the dictionary, in the source material. There was no ambiguity anymore. And as you can see in the purple circle, later it would also provide a convenient way of organizing the data to use as a web address. So that was the first challenge and the first step. After that, thank you. We needed to zoom in a bit to address data item challenges. Again, what do I mean by that? Well, to start with, look at the formatting choices that Gonçalves makes, the way that he presents the lemma itself. Some of them, particularly the verbs, are rather idiosyncratic, a little awkward, probably not the formatting that you would be likely to see in any dictionary or reference text today. So I've placed on the right there 3 words from Gonçalves next to 3 words taken from our own core vocabulary list to highlight some of the differences in formatting, some of which are a little more minor and others of which are a little more significant. And early on, we thought, well, it would probably be very useful to modernize, to edit Gonçalves's presentation, to make it a little bit more readable, a little bit more useful, or accessible. And the punctuation from the initial OCR was all over the place anyway. Someone already was going to have to go back and make corrections. Why not make edits as well? The problem, as from before, was inconsistency. In editing, some people felt that a comma should be used in one place, or a period, or nothing at all. And, was Gonçalves's little tag ADV for adverb really necessary? Did we want that? And even with a hard set of rules, there were always edge cases, instances that are murky, unclear, and with different people, different ideas, different decisions get made. So, the solution, as from before, was to go back to the source. We can make changes in presentation or decisions about how to format our words, but we need to have that data. We need to be able to show our work, to have a trail back to the initial document that allows us to see, et cetera, et cetera. But updating the formatting was still a good idea. We would also like to maintain the flexibility of being able to easily make those edits at some point in the future. So ultimately, the data had to be tagged. In a column of our database is a tag that sums up all of what Gonçalves applied to the initial word. You can see, again, a few examples of what that looks like in the purple circle. I won't get into the process of how we did the tagging itself here because it's extremely uninteresting. But it is something else which has tremendous power in it. Because we use those tags to generate the full display headers in a little bit of programming, we created an if-else. If the tags equal whatever configuration, then they spit out a header that looks like however we want it to. So now, practically at a keystroke, we can change them how we like. If we want to change how all 1,803 regular first conjugation verbs are shown, we can do that effortlessly. Likewise with all 4,152 completely regular first and second declension adjectives, and so on. By the way, I didn't mention this before, but those V and et words, we tagged those specially as well. So again, at a keystroke, we can make determinations for how all of those words are treated, if we want them included, merged, deleted, whatever. So at this point, we've addressed difficulties that we were having with how to treat the data set as a whole, as well as how we should be treating each data item individually. And in both cases, the answer was consistency. We stuck exactly to Gonçalves's original text, but we did so in a way that allows us to easily make systemic changes in the future, should we so decide. Also, if we had attempted to make editorial decisions at these stages, it would have made our next challenge substantially more difficult and time-consuming. Next slide. Thank you. So finally, we arrive at the challenge of data accuracy. What do I mean by that? That's just a fancy way of saying proofreading. I just wanted to get the word data in there for, what else? Consistency, theme. So the most straightforward, and in some ways the best, way of proofreading would be to have a team of very knowledgeable people go word by word and verify that everything matched perfectly. And given infinite time and infinite budget and access to an infinite pool of such talented people, that would be absolutely trivial. Unfortunately, we are working with real-world constraints. So we decided to do the best we could. by crowdsourcing it. I don't know if you are at all familiar with Amazon's Mechanical Turk, but it's a website that allows you to post simple tasks and get potentially hundreds of workers to chip away at them. So to help illustrate what we did, I would love to be showing you a picture of the actual task we set up on Mechanical Turk instead of a random example I pulled from the internet. But unfortunately, as with basically everything that Amazon does, Mechanical Turk is a little bit rubbish. And I spent over an hour this morning trying to log into my own account and was having technical difficulties. It's fine. Anyway, what we did, quite simply, is to place an image of a lemma taken from the original PDFs, place it next to our transcription, and ask a worker to indicate whether or not the transcription matched. Each transcription was tested 4 times. That is, 4 different people looked at the image and told us if we had transcribed it accurately. From this, we derived what I termed a confidence factor. It's not perfect, of course, but if 4 people take a look at a lemma and say the text matches, there probably aren't any glaring errors. If 0 people say that the text matches, yeah, that one probably needs some work somewhere. So it helped to cut down on what we sent to the people with limited time, who would be doing the more thorough proofreading. We sent them the words that didn't have unanimous agreement and got them fixed as best we could. And again, as I said, it's not a perfect system. Some of the people on Mechanical Turk were bad actors. That's unavoidable. Going into the numerous statistics that Mechanical Turk provides, I could see sometimes people would spend half a second, 2 seconds on some very lengthy entries and saying, oh yeah, that matched or it didn't. It was clear that they were just randomly clicking to get their little payout, which sucks, but it's something we have to work with. But most people, as best we could tell, made sincere efforts and worked in good faith. Whether they were 100% right or not, I don't know. But we were able to get some idea about it. We were able to get kind of a confidence factor about it. Now, I should say at this point that this is also another reason why it was essential to start with the base text before editing. Any sort of proofreading would be vastly complicated by continually applying ad hoc edits to the text as we went. But this sort of proofreading, crowdsourcing it, would have been absolutely impossible. We might decide we have a better way of formatting first conjugation verbs, and a very knowledgeable, experienced proofreader could see, oh yes, this is the same thing, just presented a little bit differently, but still correctly. But random crowd worker number 967281 would have no idea about that. For crowdsourcing, we can't really ask people to understand the whole concept of what we're doing or work in subtleties. We have to break it down as simply as possible. Does one thing match the other? So that's at least kind of the broad things that I was involved in. I tend to get a bit lost, as you might have just seen, in a lot of the very mechanical details. I could go on at length about the process by which we broke up the PDF into 36,000 whatever individual images for use with Mechanical Turk and our website and so forth, but I won't, because it would get a little bit technical and extremely boring. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass this back to Professor Francese now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lara. That was I thought that was quite clear. The upshot, I think, for the final result versus the original plan is that we have, I think, 3 known issues or problems, and those 3 are: 1, capitalization of proper names. All the words are capitalized in this data set, and so now they're all uncapitalized, and so that's one of the problems that Logaon has, is that somebody has to go back and fix all the capitalizations. The second one is that I know we still have typos, and Lara thinks that the later letters Q through Z might be particularly problematic there. And then the third thing is that we never did fully integrate with an existing set of lemmas. while this project was going on, the Lila project, Lila, emerged, creating a new master set of lemmas, and the lemma bank query interface. So this emerged while the project was going on. This is something that we're just not coordinated with, unfortunately, as it stands. All right, so I have 3 questions for you. Is there a better way? Probably. I assume there's a better way to digitize mixed Latin and Chinese texts now than the rather cumbersome way that we did it. Do you know of any such way? Number 2, how can you use or reuse this data to create useful resources? It's all downloadable on the site, as you can see. And 3, what similar works should be tackled next? Assuming we have a better workflow out there that we can find, what should we go after next? There's one thing that's in my sites is Cursus Literaturae Sinicum by Angelo Zottoli. This is an amazing, a gigantic 5-volume work that is a whole introduction to the Chinese literary tradition, with encompassing a vast range of texts, from the Book of Songs all the way to Qing era examination essays, poetry, and letters. And that would be all with Latin translations. It's bilingual, Latin and Chinese. I have ideas about that, but I'm really, at this point, wanted to hear what you all think. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I forgot my last slide. One more. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your attention. And please contact me at any time if you'd like to discuss this and kindred matters.
Thank you, Chris and Lara. So I guess now we would like to sort of have questions, and there are 2 ways to do questions. Is that correct? We can have a question in the chat, and we can call on people to sort of ask questions as well.
You want to let Jinyu do the moderating here? Or,
Yeah, Jinyu should be the one who, being the multilingual person that she is, can do the moderating.
Thank you so much. And so we will welcome questions in both Chinese or English. If you choose to ask questions in Chinese, I would be happy to translate your questions into English and serve as the moderator. Thank you. I think we have a question in the chat.
Yeah, that should work, right? Reverse lookup. As long as you're using traditional characters, it should find. Right, Lara?
So at this point, that is not functionality that it has. It is something that we could plausibly include later, but that is not like something that we currently have set up. At the moment, it's only Latin to Chinese. So
okay. Thank you for that suggestion. Any plan creating a basic Greek to Chinese dictionary? Not at the moment. If you can point me towards a usable basis for that, I'd be happy to look at it. dictionary search end up to handle the V and Et words? Okay, so this is a question for Lara.
Okay, so this is, at the moment, the current answer is it just excludes them. And there are a number of reasons why that's not necessarily the most satisfactory answer in the long run or in the end. But it's one of those things where we can go back because of the way that we have it set up and more easily replace those, add them back in. The main consideration is if we were to put those back in the dictionary, we would probably want to have, the V words, for example, we would probably want those to be links, because otherwise it's just frustrating to be typing in something, searching and seeing basically what amounts to not a dead end, but see not just Chinese. So yes, sharing that, if you were to search for a V word, you wouldn't find it.
Well, however, though, Lara, if you start typing, one of the things that Lara very kindly put in is this autocomplete. So I just found an Et words, necessarie, the adverb.
What?
So if I'm going for necessarie, I get this far and I see, oh, it's not in there, but these two are.
Right. Yes. That actually, oh, no, you know what? I see. That is a good point, because the V words are likely to look very similar to the actual words to which they're pointing. And
this always gets you to an actual definition rather than a V word which would give you nothing.
Thank you. That's a good point. I was, as usual, looking at it from purely a data perspective, but no, that's like it maintains the usability this way. Additionally, the Et words, they will also look quite similar, but those we probably would want to have those combined in some way. But there's maybe a question of like, which is the best or most prominent word that we really would want to be on top of the stack, that we really would want to be searching for. So that is definitely a future consideration, whether it's one that we'll be able to attend to in a timely fashion or at all. Hard to say, but that is a very good question and well taken. Thank you.
So while we wait for additional questions in the chat area, I have a question about just the content of the dictionary. Thank you so much for the discussion on the technicalities of digitization. While I was going through the dictionary, I was asking myself the question about whether there is a hidden religious agenda there, but I don't seem to find any effort to sneaking words or any words of indoctrination. I don't know whether that's a legitimate word, but based on your observation, what do you think were the criteria for the selection of words in the dictionary? Any observations?
Well, I think he wanted everything in the kitchen sink. You make an excellent point about the religious words. Those are actually in a separate appendix at the end of the dictionary. The editors, and Gonçalves himself, separated off a separate dictionary that is just ecclesiastical vocabulary. I think he was aware that not everybody wanted that or needed that. And that those who were interested in that specific topic wanted it all in one spot. So that I think he's trying to be as capacious as he can. I haven't done the research into the sources that he used. I suspect that the Stephanus, the great Stephanus, Thesaurus Lingvae Latini, not the modern project, but Patrick will remember the exact title of this, the Great Stephanus Dictionary of the 18th century, which is the largest, still to this day, the largest Latin dictionary. I bet you that he was taking a lot of his idioms and words from that, but I haven't done all the tracking down.
Right. Thank you so much. There is another question in the chat.
Oh, this is very helpful from Juan Coderch, who did a lot of the work, did much editing work. He didn't detect any attempt to include or avoid specific vocabulary, either for religion or social purposes. He just included everything he knew. Yeah, that jives with my understanding too. It's all in there. Valde magnum est, magnum lexicon.
Yes, I found what struck me is that there's so many words for diseases. I was looking at another screen, and which has the actual texts. Diseases, all sorts of them, and also herbs, all sorts of them. I don't know whether these herbs have medicinal properties or not, and that's another, that might be a criteria for inclusion. But I agree, it's very comprehensive. I mean, the dictionary itself is very comprehensive. But sometimes the interpretation, the Chinese glossary, that is the Chinese translation, is a little interesting, because the word Zephyrus, I guess we usually translate it into just west wind, right? But it specifies it as southwest wind in the Chinese translation, and that's the only translation that is provided.
Yeah, I think there's some, I mean, the students who worked in this project were somewhat repelled by the archaic nature of the Chinese. And so that, to me, early on, we considered, should we try and modernize this in some way? And, we just sort of gave up on that fairly quickly. So I'm very curious to know if people think, how useful is this? Are these Chinese translations really? Are they so outdated for the most part as to be, to need to be thoroughly revised? Or is it kind of like Lewis and Short in English, or like LSJ in English, where it's like old-timey, but you kind of get the idea?
Thank you. We have more questions in the chat area now.
Yeah. Scott Farrington says, do you his teaching philosophy reflects an attempt to use Latin as a lingua franca? I think that at this point in Macau, it's really Portuguese is important, as well as Latin. Latin for church matters, Portuguese for civil and administrative matters. Patrick Burns pointed out this nato natare, a striking feature of the nato natare entry is that he goes very quickly to the idioms. The sort of wealth of idiomatic meanings is, I think, very notable in that entry, and probably pretty representative. And that reflects his love of sort of culturally embedded language use, right? So these things are natabant pavimento vino. This is a very not to be translated literally kind of phrase, and I think he has a relish for that kind of culturally embedded language use. The great Li Hui Rosina. Thank you very much for making this dictionary available. it is very useful for our Chinese teachers and students. Look forward to more research of this kind. Thank you so much, Rosina. It's great to have you here, and please send us suggestions. James Smith is someone who's chiefly interested in classical Chinese. This is much more useful than more modernized dictionary. Thank you, that's very kind. I would hope that, so the incredible literary inheritance of sort of Qing Dynasty missionaries and scholars is something that is just a real treasure that needs to be investigated more. So hopefully this can get us a start. Well, that gets us up to about 8 o'clock. I'm just so grateful that you all could be here, and I hope that we can continue these kinds of projects in the future. Please be in touch. And thank you again for coming, and thank you so much to the Guangxi Center for Scholars and to Jinyu Liu in particular for organizing this really marvelous event. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to both of the speakers for the wonderful talk. And you have the links in the chat area. Please save the links, which would enable you to access the resources. And I also greatly appreciate Professor Mark Mastrangelo's hosting of the event. And there's, I'm sure the users of the digitized versions will find more topics to pursue. So the digitization, in fact, provides a tool for many of us for historical studies. And I'm not sure whether everybody will be using the dictionary as a dictionary, but it tells us a lot about for example, the agenda of the Jesuits, their linguistic approaches, and in fact, the way they translated the terms. I was looking at Zeno, for example. It's interesting that the dictionary doesn't explain who Zeno was. It says it's a name of ancient sage. So it's very vague. A lot of the ancient philosophers have lost their names, in fact, in this dictionary. There is a blank reference to them as ancient sages. So that's quite interesting. All right, thank you very much. If you have further, we have another question, is that right? If you have further questions, please feel free to, I'm sure the speakers would be happy to take questions via email. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a nice day.